Few topics get me more goosebumped out than thinking about the fact that we are just scratching the potential, not just of human consciousness or human vitality. We are scratching the possibility of a much more intelligent life on Earth. As biology explodes on the back end of this extinction event that we are in the midst of, we are going to have more intelligence within the biologic matrix than has ever existed before. I love that. I love that there's always more potential after extinction than before the extinction. And in that incredibly intelligent and grace-filled fabric of the biology that we live within, we need to discuss today the topic of death. If there's any topic that's going to allow us the space to birth that future, it's going to be a fundamental change in our relationship to this thing that we call death. It was early on in my hospital work at the University of Virginia. I was probably in my third year of residency or something like that. And once you're a senior resident in the ICUs, you're running those ICUs. You know, the attending physicians will come in for an hour or two or three in the morning to round with the team, talk about the patients. But the rest of the 24-hour period, you are really running those ICUs. And you know, every few minutes, something else is happening in those ICUs. Critical medicine changes, drug changes, IV drip lines need change rates. Somebody's in congestive heart failure suddenly. It's always chaos control in those ICUs, and I freaking loved it. I loved the adrenaline rush of it. I loved the ability to be working with drugs and tools that could change physiology in a split second. I felt like a god. I could choose whose heart rate would be at which level by the rate of a drip that I would pour into their vein. Everything was controlled because we had taken away all autonomy from the biology of our patients. We had tubes in every orifice. We have literally rectal tubes to pull the stool out of their colon. We've got catheters into their bladder to pull the urine out of them. We've got, you know, central lines into their giant vena cava, garden hose of a blood vessel going into their heart. We've got a massive cannula in their neck to measure arterial blood gas and chemistries in real time. We've got a tube down their throat taking away their ability to breathe and taking that over on a respirator machine. We've got drugs turned on to make sure their brain is shut down so they're not conscious of the horror that they're currently living in. I couldn't see all of that humanitarian crisis because the metrics for success that I had been given were blood pressure, blood sugar, ins and outs of fluids, the amount of sodium and potassium in the blood chemistry in the morning, the glucose level. These were the metrics of success. And I felt so smart and powerful and, in fact, effective as a physician when I made all those numbers look right. That worked for the first year or two, but by the time I'd been through that a few cycles, and realized by the sixth, eighth rotation through the ICUs, I was starting to see the same patients who were bouncing in and out of the hospital, back in the same horrific state, and then we would pound on them for days or weeks to get them back to some sort of autonomous physiology, to get them discharged again, and then they would bounce back in again. And every time they came back in, their whole situation was even more horrific and amped up, and multi-organ failure and the rest. But the journey that was really intense was watching the toll on their families. Watching children come in month after month, watching their parents go through this horrific experience, never touched by a human hand unless it had a latex glove, unawares, drugged to the point where they're unawares of human speech. They're in a complete stupor. Watching this wear on families over time, I could see psychosis arise in family members after they're in and out of the ICU every day, trying to advocate for their loved one, trying to be present. They start going psychotic. They start getting paranoid. They start getting abusive back towards the staff, or they start getting hopeless and depressed. It was too much for the human psyche to hold. And so I started to kind of reevaluate my metrics of success. And in that third year, and then leading into my subsequent year of teaching when I was a chief resident, I started to give myself space to see it from a different angle, to start to see this whole ICU journey from the perspective of the patient, perspective of the family with that patient, that loved that patient, that had a lifetime of memories with that patient. And what I witnessed was something completely different, of course. I was witnessing a complete disruption of a spiritual journey. It was not a journey that could be delayed forever. Ultimately, the patient is going to die, and the family is going to have to be okay with that. On some level, they're going to have to go through that grief process. But the reality is I was making that journey not only different, not only was I interrupting it, I was shortening it down to seconds rather than weeks, months, and years that can happen in a healthy death process. Through all of my intervention, through all of my interruption of human physiology in an effort to keep the patient alive, I was taking away their death. And that is a vicious thing to do to a human soul that's been on a long journey, a beautiful journey. They've had children, they've had community, they've had friends, they've had fellowship. They've changed lives by their presence here on earth. They've done amazing projects. They've grown gardens. They've bathed in the sun on distant beaches. They've talked multiple languages. They've created song. They've created dance. They've created beauty in their lives. And in those last months of their life, I was taking away death. The journey into death has long been revered in so many cultures around the world. All of us come from a culture that revered death on some level. It was only with the Industrial Revolution where we got this heady belief that we could stave off death, expand and extend life through some sort of technological innovation to invent away from death, that we ultimately destroyed our relationship to that death. We have come to fear the death that we once revered. Nobody is taught how to have a reverent walk to the last chapter of life. Death and dying is our opportunity to integrate all that we have learned in a life that often was run at a pace that was too fast to integrate. Death and dying is the opportunity for us to pause long enough that the body sits still so that everything that we've done in our lives can catch up. And in waves of memory, we start to upload the information at the soul level. We start to really integrate at a wisdom level all that we've experienced. The hard drive does not exist in the brain. Our long-term memory storage is not there. We've got short-term storage of memory, the memory process in the hippocampus, a little spot about the size of a pea behind the ear there. The hippocampus takes short-term experience, turns it into short-term memory, and then downloads it into your peripheral tissue where it's held in this ethereal state, somewhere in the fascial planes, this weird network of fibrous, flexible tissue that dwells beneath your skin, between your organs. And within the water structure that is like a jello type consistency, that jello holds the vibration of all that you've done, all that you've said, all that you've loved, all the love that's come back to you, all the memories that have stacked into your lifetime. But when you are running at a pace up here in your head that you cannot allow that hard drive to integrate the information into your now, you do not have wisdom. Death and dying starts years before our heart stops. Death and dying is the process of the body starting to dial back. I believe this happens to a lot of people, even if it's suicide that chops their life span apparently short. The depression that leads up to that. I years ago experienced major depression myself, and I can tell you I slowed down. I slowed way down. I was in a death and dying process. I had planned out my own death. I knew which bridge I would drive off. You know, at the end of a 36-hour shift, everybody would know I just fell asleep at the wheel because I was a doctor working 36 hours at a time. Nobody would think differently. Wouldn't look like a suicide. I got a life insurance policy that covered suicide in case somebody decided it was a suicide so my kids could have the money. I was at that point. I was ready to check out on some level because I was so frustrated that I could not find my purpose on this planet. And so the major depression slowed me down and I began to integrate. And if not for the depression slowing me down, I probably would have died. Because if any of those dark thoughts of hopelessness had continued in a state of being that wasn't slowed down by major depression, I would have charged off that bridge and I wouldn't be with you here today. I give great gratitude to my depression that it slowed me down and allowed everything that had happened in my life to start to catch up. My personality is drive forward. My personality type and my character don't often take the time to stop and celebrate the milestones, integrate the information. I have a high tolerance for continuing to push forward no matter how exciting and how much happens in a week. I'm not good at slowing it down and letting it integrate. But I'm better than I was a decade ago. I'm certainly better than I was 15 years ago in the midst of that depression. Because I've learned that if I don't allow the slowdown to happen and I don't integrate, I don't gain wisdom. Death is the ultimate harvest of wisdom within your life. So let the slowdown happen. Aging is on purpose. The slowdown that would lead to a death event is calling in the opportunity to integrate. If we drug that journey up with the opioids or everything else, we fail to integrate. We fail to make that next karmic leap, perhaps. Maybe we're not really spinning the wheels towards a higher consciousness, a higher vibration of human awareness, if we are drugged out of our capacity to integrate. And so start now preparing for the beauty of what happens with death. Prepare now a plan of how you are going to start dying every day so that you can live more fully tomorrow. I am more alive right now because of the very future that sits within me. I have integrated enough to envision a future that is different from today for myself, for my loved ones, for my world. And I have a desire to be with you in community around that. Not because I'm super smart, not because I'm anything other than a soul that is slowing down and being willing to die to myself every day. Remind myself as I fall asleep, integrate, Zach. Have gratitude for what just happened today. I met all kinds of cool people this week. It's been wonderful. I have new friends. I feel like I have a new family here at Commune. It's been an extraordinary journey because I allowed it to integrate. Because I laid there at night in the dark, closing my eyes, dying to myself again, saying, slow down, body. Slow down, water. Let the waves come across. Integrate. Be more alive tomorrow. Death and dying isn't something that we have to wait till the end of life for. If we start to live each day more strongly for the death that we were willing to do last night, not only will we integrate wisdom faster, we will reset the biologic clock. Because if we allow the negative emotions and self-doubt and all of the things that might run through your head in a day to dissipate and let go and then take a pause and celebrate and say gratitudes, we reset the water structure throughout the whole body. This is our opportunity to die to ourselves every day, which is what Scripture told us to do, but I didn't understand that. Not until I went through the journey of ICU care, life, major depression, suicidality, and the bounce out of that into a vibrancy of life that I would not give back for anything. I now know that I am ready to die again today so that I would slow down enough to integrate, so that I would slow down enough to reset, to clear the traumas, to clear the self-doubt, the self-talk, the blah, blah, blah. Let it go. Create the space. Once you've created the space, you can start to step forward with a new biology, new epigenetics, a new freedom, a youthfulness in you at any age. Die to yourself today. Let go of the past so that you can fill your life with the wisdom and of the integrated knowledge base that you've created over your lifetime of experience. I have never sat at the bedside of anybody who said that they wished they had worked more in their lives. But I have had innumerable conversations about how they wish they had spent more time in nature, how they had spent more time hiking and doing the things they loved, canoeing, etc., with family, with friends, with lovers. Too often I have heard people regret the lack of love that they generated in their lives. They were too lonely. They accepted the self-doubt. They accepted the self-talk that diminished their capacity to shine light into the world. And suddenly, as they slowed down enough and reintegrated all of their life experience, they said, shoot, I could have done it so much brighter. That would have been awesome. I've heard people say that they had the wrong group of friends their entire lives, and they only realized it in the last few months of their life. But I watched those same people make a whole bunch of new friends in those last few months of their life. They had spiritual discussions and investigations and inquiries in their life and social experiences that they had never had before, and they were enriched by it, and they never died in regret. The integration only opened up a more rich last chapter. I don't want you to wait till the last few months of life to say, shoot, I should have done a little different. I could amp it up more. I want you to do that today. But to do that, you're going to have to slow it down. You have to step into meditation, prayer, spiritual song, dance, fireside chats. Find a campfire. Find a backyard to put a fire pit in. Get around a fire at night under the stars and ask each other, what is the highest joy you have today, and what is the future you would like to see tomorrow? What is the highest joy you have today, and what is the future you would like to see tomorrow? We need to talk to each other with the reverence that would do those questions well. We should listen carefully to each other in the responses that we would give to that. And so how should we prepare? Through my years as a hospice director, I would say that you want to start to know your options. It's a lot like getting ready to go to college or get a new job. You want to know the lay of the land when it comes to this death and dying process. In addition to those releases and surrenders of our daily death to ourselves so that we can birth another person tomorrow, we need to be prepared for the final slowdown, the final integration, the final jump from planet Earth back into the ethereal. We're going to need to do this soon. Whether it come in a month, a year, a decade, or a lifetime, it comes fast. And so there's no time like now to start talking about it with people you love. What conscious journey would you like to take in the last slowdown? Regardless of what age it happens at, who are the people that you would want at the bedside? What are the conversations that you would like to have? What are the gifts that you would like to pass on to your friends, to your family, to your acquaintances? What things have you collected over your lifetime that you would want to give a conscious gift to while you're still conscious to do it? An interesting question, and once you've come up with that list, is why are you waiting until then? Maybe we should start gifting our greatest things to one another now, so that we would enrich each other's lives and be able to see the fruit of our gifts through our coexistence together in a gifting society. I think there's a lot of opportunity there. But at worst case scenario, what are you going to give in that last chapter? To your grandkids, to your kids, to your lovers, to your friends, to your partners, whatever it is. What are you going to gift? And maybe it's a thing, but more likely and hopefully it's a word. It's a word of grace. It's a word of gratitude. It's a word of thanksgiving. I am hopeful that you will begin to see that you are already on the journey towards death because you were born. You were set in motion with a final endpoint that your soul was aware of, I believe, as soon as it signed up. As soon as you signed up for this journey, it knew the beginning point and the end point and probably everything in between. And so you're on the death and dying process right now. And just as we can die to ourselves every day, we can prepare our mind for the integration, for the wisdom dump. What are we going to give to humans around us? What information do we want to pass on? What are the most important things you've learned in your lifetime that you don't want your kids not to know? Why aren't we telling them the most important thing right now? Of all the things I've learned, it's this. This is right now. Because you know that's going to change in a few months. You're going to have some new epiphany. And that's going to be the next most important thing that you've ever had and that you would want to give to your kids if this was the last day you were alive. We need to communicate with one another with such reverence of the moment that we both are alive right now is a freaking miracle. It is a quantum miracle that defies mathematical possibility that all those 70 trillion cells would vibrate with 14 quadrillion mitochondria within them to release light energy so that you would be alive right now. It's impossible. It's a mathematical impossibility that you are here, and you are, so you are on purpose. You're here. That's the reverence we should have for one another. When we come into each other's space, listen carefully to one another. Respect one another. touch one another, way more hugs, way more shoulder rubs. Let's take care of each other. Life is short. We have such a short amount of time to bless one another. Surprise somebody today with your nurture. Surprise somebody today with an attentive ear. Nobody's seeing them and nobody's hearing them. You could disrupt that pattern. Who will you sit down with and be completely present with today? That's the greatest gift you could give. We need to start dying intentionally every day so that we get better at the last chapter of humanity. We are in our hospice moment and we need to come together now at the proverbial bedside of our own species and say, I can see you, I can hear you, I love you, you are beautiful. Your life has been rich, it is on purpose, it has been broken, yes, there's heartbreak, yes, there's pain, yes, there's broken relationships, there's disrupted jobs, there's lost jobs, there's lost relations, the whole thing, yes, 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 and it's beautiful. And you put the best foot forward you could every day. And yes, there was abuse, and there was sexual tension and violence and abuse and verbal abuse and all of this, and yes, yes, and you're beautiful for all of that. The scars that you carry forward make you beautiful. It's who you are, and I can see you right now, and I can love you right now, and we are in our hospice moment, and if we don't see it, we will miss it, and we will not rise. We will not up-level as a species. Wherever our energy fields go back to next, they will have to come back at the 3D level. They're going to find another three-dimensional body to jump into to do the journey again, hopefully to be able to shoot to the 5th dimension again. We need a higher density of vibration. That's what we're striving for at the soul level. But we are stuck in the 3 dimensions now, and we must do it well. We must do 3 dimensions well, and we will do it well when we step into a moment that is so present that it erases the past and acknowledges a future we have never seen before. We need to die, and we need to do it well. If we do it really well right now, we may birth that future before we leave the species in the dust, in the extinction.